Hello, welcome to this Lit in 5 video looking at Othello's tragic arc, his journey as a tragic hero throughout Act 4 of the play. I've also just tagged on to the front of this video a couple of quotations from Act 3, Scene 4. The previous video dealt with Act 3 and specifically Act 3, Scene 3. Hugely important scene in terms of Othello's tragic journey, but I just found two quotations I thought were also worth a mention. Okay, let's carry on with our analysis. Okay, so a few quick mentions here from the end of Act 3, Scene 4, which I thought was also significant and useful to consider. So we're going in kind of this direction, sort of clockwise, starting from top left. Here's a speech here from Desdemona to Amelia. Believe me, I have rather lost my purse full of crusados, but my noble Moor is true of mind, and made of no such baseness as jealous creatures are. It were enough to put him to ill thinking. Is he not jealous, who he? I think the son where he was born drew all such humours from him. So we've just seen prior to this, of course, where Iago has absolutely successfully managed to sort of breed jealousy and all the irrational behaviour that can create in people. So we know through dramatic irony this is not true. This will be one of the last times in the play as well where we have that epithet of my noble Moor. So the nobility of Othello, one of the last times we'll hear this now, as we're going to see Othello has successfully been transformed, all changed, as a quote we'll see in a moment suggests, of what jealousy has done towards Othello. A very useful and quick reminder here of how Othello is unsuited to the world of deception, which is obviously Iago's forte, but certainly not Othello's strength or talent either. So how is it with you, my lord? Well, my good lady. And then in an aside, Shakespeare has him say, oh, hardness to dissemble. So to deceive and tell lies and be false, that does not come naturally at all to Othello, as he, tries to maintain this idea of everything's fine, everything's usual, as he goes about trying to determine Desdemona's cheating on him, her infidelity, which of course is not true. There's a great quote coming up, which we'll show you shortly, which Iago talks about Othello's unbookish jealousy. So a very important adjective, unbookish, sort of mocking him, really, not to his face, but he's not very clever. Hasn't read many books, this Othello fella. So he's been very easy to manipulate because he's unbookish, and jealousy is something he doesn't understand. He just, chops people up for a living, and that's his strength as a general. But that's very important to notice, I think, how that's not Othello's forte. Moving across to the right of the screen here, I guess this is only slightly to do with Othello's tragic arc. It's maybe more to do with proving Iago's success and the success of his plans and his machinations. So here's Desdemona pursuing her suit, as she promised, as a loyal and devoted friend and a loyal and devoted person to Cassio, her friend, but also to her husband. Loyalty and devotion again. The way this proves Iago has succeeded is because that he said he will turn, quote, her virtue, Desdemona's virtue, into pitch. So look at the loyalty and devotion Desdemona is showing here as she pushes, and she does push here, showing her boldness of spirit to have her husband reinstate Cassio. Come, you'll never meet a more sufficient man. The handkerchief. I pray, talk to me of the handkerchief. And then she continues talking of Cassio in terms of his qualities. So Iago has transformed virtue into pitch. And then there's the wonderful ambiguity of that line. You'll never meet a more sufficient man. Desdemona just means a loyal and devoted ally who loves you and is devoted to you. But sufficient, in terms of Othello now, from his point of view, hamartia of blindness, also targeting masculine hubris and pride. That's viewed in a more sexual sense now, in terms of cuckoldry. You'll never meet a more sufficient man capable of satisfying my needs in the bedroom. That's how trifles as light as air are to the jealous proofs as holy writ. And so a man that all his time has found that his good fortunes on your love. But Othello wants nothing of this. This is just further proof, in inverted commas, of kind of sexual infidelity and cuckoldry. Finally, on this slide, we just mentioned change and transformation in Othello a moment ago. Things which are now starting to confirm the audience's initial expectations that they had of a Moor in Act 1. So if we just look in the top left again, baseness, being sort of less than kind of, powerful and, lowered in status, but also creatures. So, if anything, this play has proven that it doesn't matter what race or ethnicity you are, we are all susceptible or prone to being manipulated by jealousy. But because Othello is of Moorish descent, that horribly gets tagged onto his ethnicity as well. So if you look here in Desdemona, my lord is not my lord, as in humour altered. So we're absolutely seeing the change here in transformation. Another step on that journey of Othello's peripeteia towards sort of animal, violent behaviour. But of course brought around by our supposedly civilised Venetian in Iago. Another little mention here of sort of Othello's boldness, Desdemona's boldness of character. So I've spoken for you all I can, and I've stood within the blank of his displeasure for my free speech. What I can do I will, and more I will than for myself I dare. Let that suffice you. So further proof of her loyalty and her devotion. And even though she knows it'll bring about Othello's anger, she's committed to that. She is devoted in terms of loyalty. Okay, moving on. Here's Amelia here, who, much like her husband, is very learned of all human qualities as well. She has some very wise words in terms of jealousy and the effects it can have. But jealous souls will not be answered so. They are not ever jealous for the cause, but jealous because they are jealous. Jealousy is a monster begot upon itself, born on itself. So there's that power of jealousy, regardless of your race, your ethnicity, to distort and sort of contort truth into something other or different. Desdemona says, heaven keep that monster from Othello's mind. Well, Act 3, Scene 3, too late. Okay, and then you have to question, if jealousy itself is regarded as a monster, then what does that make the person who embeds or instills that monster in Othello's mind? I do like this image here, that she considers that something of state or kind of public political business has puddled his clear spirit. I do like that imagery of sort of being polluted and poisoned. That obviously runs throughout the play. So that's there to look at as well. And that will do us on Act 3, Scene 4. Okay, nice little few quotes there just to finish off on. Let's move our attentions now fully and properly to Act 4. Okay, so we're into Act 4, Scene 1 now. I want to start here at the bottom first of all. This is Iago gloating over Othello's unconscious body. So work on my medicine. We love the irony of that kind of inversion of medicine, which is actually poison. Very revealing of Iago and his mindset. But this line here is really important. Thus credulous fools are caught. So you'll recall his imagery to do with net and spider and web, all these kinds of things earlier on. But credulous fools, believing idiots, gullible, easily manipulated. And we have to consider that in terms of Othello, I think. He is being far too easily led by the nose, to use another brilliant Iago quote Shakespeare gives him. He is far too believing. This is all too easy for Iago, and there he is gloating over him as well. Now, I also want you to look across to the other side here as well. This is a brilliant quote, and it's not very often discussed or used. It's there, Iago on the right. He says, well then, if there are plenty of cuckolds in the world, which there are, he argues, then there's many a beast then in a populous city, and there is many a civil monster. given the number of cuckolded men in the world. Now, that quote is obviously about cuckoldry, but I think we should be considering this in terms of Iago as well. And that idea of inversion, which Shakespeare has in relation to race and ethnicity here, in terms of our antagonist and our protagonist. Take away the cuckoldry for a moment. Remember, we started with the Act 1 video. The audience arrive expecting to see certain kinds of stereotypes or behaviours associated with Othello, who is the Moor of Venice. Disproven, wrong-footed, slowly starting to be converted and turned into that now. Take the cuckoldry out. Consider this quote in relation to our supposedly civilised white Venetian Iago. And then you can see there is absolutely then many beasts or beastly characters in a populous city, Venice, Cyprus where we're at now. And there is absolutely, when looking at the character of Iago, many civil monsters. Okay, I love the juxtaposition of those clashing terms. A monster who is civil, or a monster posing as civil or civilised with civility. That should be, in my opinion, Iago's epitaph. Here lies Iago, Moor Killer, which is what his name means in a certain translation. A civil monster. Okay, so that's obviously, we can steer that towards Othello now in terms of hamartia of blindness, foolishness, gullibility. We're going to look more at hubris and masculine pride in a moment, but they are just quotes that sum up Iago's dismissive attitude towards Othello's, let's say, we're not calling them stupid, but let's say intellectual inferiority as a mere soldier, powerful soldier, but he's a credulous fool who is easily exploited through, quote coming up shortly, his unbookish jealousy. Okay, so they're really, really amazing quotes that you don't tend to see a lot in essays. Depends on the question, of course, but they lend themselves to some fantastic arguments. So we just mentioned audience expectations and what they originally expected to see in terms of Othello and Moor in Act 1. Not the case, etc., etc. But if you look over here on the right-hand column, Iago pretending to be concerned and compassionate because someone is around now. Cassio, no, don't touch him. Let the fit work its way out. If not, he foams at the mouth and by breaks out to savage madness. Now again, there's just a brilliant two-word quote which perfectly proves audience expectations early on. He is evermore now, Othello, being brought closer to savage madness. We'll illustrate that in a second. I'll cut her all to pieces, some of the quotes that are in this. How shall I murder him? Show you in a couple of slides. I will chop her into messes, cuckold me, etc., etc. But that's being brought about by the civil monster, the true beast of the play, who resides in a populous city like Venice. So that's very important to understand that Iago has brought Othello into confirming that stereotype, really, but it's been done by a civil monster. Just backtracking a little bit there, we're looking at some kind of hubris things here. There's Iago manipulating Othello with his words, with her, on her, whatever you will. So deliberately planting images of Cassio being physically intimate with Desdemona there. Look at Othello here though. Again, this is typical Iago as well. Watch Othello. Shakespeare has Othello say, "It is not words that shake me thus." So there's a concern with his masculine pride and hubris, and not being undone and being unmanned by just mere words. So there's his reputation and his pride, his hubris, and then he collapses and becomes incoherent in that bit there. But we'll show you on this slide now and the next one just count. You can be an arithmetician like Cassio. You can just count the number of times that Iago targets masculine hubris here. I mock you? No, by heaven. I wish you would bear your fortune like a man. So watch all the references to manliness and manhood here. Show you more on the very next slide. Next. And here they are. Look, good say be a man. Whilst you were here, overwhelmed at your grief. So, pragmatically, that's getting towards the fact that, well, you're supposed to be a general, aren't you? Here you are, a big there you were a minute ago, a big gibbering mess. Overwhelmed with grief. And this is horribly stereotypical, and we'd call it toxic masculinity today. But the idea that grief and emotion would be part of a man's makeup, particularly a proud, powerful general like Othello, then, that is goading and sort of needling Othello here. But he knows exactly what he's doing. Yeah, but a passion most unsuiting such a man, my lord. So look at the kind of terms of respect, apparently. Good sir, be a man. So there's flattery and praise, but accompanied straight away with that goading of Othello. And so he begs for patience. Don't just go and kill her yet. Iago wants another opportunity to compound and reinforce and further manipulate Othello. So he gets him to be patient and hold off a while. Marry, listen to me, be patient. Or if you're incapable of that, then we'll say that you are all in spleen. So again, touching upon that idea of being not the master of his own passions, but being at the mercy of his own passions, which on the great chain of being, I'm sad to say, feeds into the idea of race and bestial behaviour, and nothing of a man. So look, you can say 1, 2, 3, three sort of references goading his masculinity here, and you can see how successfully that sort of pricks his pride. Do you hear me, Iago? I will be found most cunning in my patience, but do you hear? Eventually, I will satisfy my lust for bloody in my patience. Yeah, that's not amiss. Just hang on a minute, and then we'll do it that way. So I've brought up again that diagram I put on the Act 3 video, which is just really important for the whole tragedy itself, really, and any tragic hero ever. So look at the stuff in green. Start with the antagonist, targeting the external factors of sort of masculine expectations to target the hero's own flaws. A couple of stuff in blue there, a couple of moments in blue as well. So the external factors of sort of misogyny and the idea that women are incapable of being governed and ruled, and their appetite is beyond any husband's control. So we're looking at the women there as the fiend and creatures of deceit, supposing them to be chaste when they are creatures of appetite. So amazing manipulation from Iago, but you then have to spin that back to the flaws of Othello here in terms of masculine pride and how easily and how successfully that is targeted. Here's our quote here from Act 4, Scene 1 again. Act 4, Scene 1 is just absolutely full of so many brilliant and useful quotations. 2 on the previous one, and here's an extra one here. Look at the certainty as well in Iago's dialogue here from Shakespeare. As he, Cassio, shall smile, I'll make him smile. Othello shall go mad. So look at the modal verb of certainty there. Absolutely, he's no reason to doubt himself. He is the master manipulator. So, as he, Cassio, shall smile, Othello shall go mad. And his unbookish jealousy, the modal verb, must construe poor Cassio's smiles, gestures and light behaviour quite in the wrong. And then turns again, like, how do you know, Lieutenant? So, as many mouths as a hydra, which is a quote that Shakespeare has Cassio use about himself. But again, we can absolutely use that for Iago and his linguistic sort of repertoire. But there's that kind of idea we just mentioned of Othello's intellectual inferiority, his unbookish jealousy, a real kind of key area which Iago does and successfully manipulates all the way through the play. 3 more moments here from Act 4, Scene 1, 3 slides rather. This will be over very soon. Have a look at the stuff in red. We mentioned manipulation by the civil monster of Iago a minute ago, bringing Othello to the expectations the audience originally had of quote-unquote savage madness. So Othello has just witnessed a conversation between Cassio and Iago, not about Desdemona, but about Bianca. And that's worked because, look, how shall I murder him, Iago? So we know from Act 3, Scene 3, that Iago has successfully sort of embedded himself as Othello's sort of confidant and his friend and his loyal servant in that mock marriage. So look at how Othello is confiding and seeking Iago's counsel now. How shall I murder? Oh, Iago, this is terrible. And so look, these are sort of the expectations, I guess, that the audience originally had of Othello. I will chop her into messes. Cuckold me! So there's his masculine hubris and pride there. Further masculine and hubristic pride there. Look, with mine officer. So reputation. But we're being sort of territorial, which I guess is in the makeup of a soldier or certainly a general. We've also got reference to the marital bed as well. So of course, that's used by Iago to further stoke Othello's anger and to further his descent into savage madness. The space, the territory of the marital bed being sort of defiled, that's a good word to use there, poisoned and sort of tainted. That's going to perfectly antagonise a soldier and a warrior like Othello. In a moment, we're going to show you the quote where Iago says to the people from Venice, "He is much changed," as though he's had nothing to do with that change at all. But they are, as a sign of how he's changed, Othello this is. Look at the stuff in green, please. So this misogyny, really, really bitter, embittered misogyny starting to come forward now from Othello, which is really shocking. If you look at early in the play, his attitude towards Desdemona was one of equality, respecting her rank and social status in sort of Venetian society. But now we're full on, all women are this, God, she's just another woman. Really, really bitter, But look at some of the language here. It says ironically here, a fine woman, oh, fair, what a sweet woman. So real disgust. She seems to have confirmed expectations of women that seem to have been dormant in Othello, but that's again due to Iago, and it's not true, of course. So the world hath not a sweeter creature. She might lie by an emperor's side and command him tasks. Particularly these two here. Sweeter creature, emperor's side. I don't want to speak with her in case, lest her body and beauty unprovide my mind again. So we're starting to see this idea now of women as sort of a devil in disguise, a temptress, a wicked sort of seducer of men, very sort of Keats and Lamia, femme fatale, a bewitching beauty. Okay, so real bitter misogyny here starting to occur now. So absolutely, he is much changed, to use Iago's words, but let's not leave Iago's role in that change out of that. Final word about stuff in red there as well. The act of killing her, it's significant. We have the word justice associated with it. We'll see in Act 5 that Othello justifies it, else she'll betray more men. So that misogyny of the time and the era taken to ridiculous sort of extremes now, that it's an act of mercy to prevent another man being cheated or deceived by her beauty. I think in the Act 3 Scene 3 video I used the word homosocial. The idea that bonds between men are more important and of higher value than the bond between man and wife. Okay, so that should go hand in hand, I think, with any discussion of misogyny. The fact that, male solidarity is of a higher status and importance than a marital bond, and that's starting to emerge now with that use of the word justice, and as we move towards Act 5 as well. Okay, moving on. Here's a further moment of that ambiguity in terms of Desdemona being loyal and devoted, but now it's misinterpreted thanks to Iago's poisoning of Othello. Desdemona does indeed have a love she bears towards Cassio, but it's a love of devotion and fidelity to him as a friend. But obviously now, in this context, at this stage of the play, it looks like she's brazenly admitting that she has extramarital love towards Cassio, and Othello can't believe what he's hearing in front of everyone. Fire and brimstone, and there's poor Desdemona, who's just bewildered about why he's getting into such a peak of anger, and then he strikes her. We don't need to say much about that. That is, just happens in the play. Deeply shocking moment. But what we're looking at here in terms of trying to think of attitudes of then, look at how Othello's public reputation is the thing which is prized most here. My lord, this would not be believed in Venice. Now remember, Venice is supposed to be a byword of civility and Christian sort of civility as well. But Othello's reputation here, look. Though I should swear I saw it. So Iago is succeeding in yet another way here in terms of Othello's civic reputation. His kind of place as a general is starting to be unmade here as well, and of course he's being brought ever close to being seen as a Moor of savage madness, the barbarous, uncivilized, animalistic behaviour the audience were expecting in Act 1, Scene 1. More of the bitter misogyny coming out here as well. Devil, oh devil, devil. It's interesting that we will eventually have demi-devil of Iago later in the play. But we get this imagery here of crocodile tears and women being associated with deceit again. Grimly ironic, of course, that the deceiving figure is there right next to Othello while he does this. But the atrocious irony of a genuinely loyal and devoted character being besmirched and demonised as the deceptive figure of dissembling. Lodovico, the cousin, says, call her back, bring her back, please. And look, it doesn't get more accurate than this. Truly an obedient lady. Perhaps too obedient, but that's for a different video, of course. And then Othello says, yeah, I'll call her back. What would you with her say? So he starts to build towards the idea. Now, well, you're a man, even though you're a cousin, you can have your way with her as well. She's there for everyone. It seems real embittered misogyny coming through now. Okay, so we'll deal with the further examples of misogyny here, but there is down the bottom, look, he is much changed. Ooh, unbelievable from Iago. But the stuff in blue at the top of the page, again, just this really bitter misogyny. Oh, she can turn and yet go on and turn again. That feeds into that idea of the insatiable female appetite. So she can have many turns with many male partners and not be satisfied. The idea of crocodile tears that we just see, oh, she can weep, say, oh, weep, yes. Implication being that they're fake tears. Obedient to many men, it seems. And then well-painted passions. So you see that in a number of pieces of drama around this time. Women using makeup and cosmetics, as we'd say today, just absolutely chimes with the misogyny of the era that, they're creatures of deceit. They actually look one way, but they paint themselves to hide and cover up what they truly are and to fool men. And there she is, dismissed in a really, really kind of disrespect. Get you away. I'll send for you soon. Okay? So real bitter examples of that misogyny coming through. Please don't forget the dramatic irony in all of this. The audience absolutely know, and the words of Lodovico a minute ago, in terms of Desdemona's virtue, we know that's absolutely correct in terms of Desdemona. All right. But let's turn our attention to what I guess is most important to Othello. Horrible to say, but that's the attitude and the character and the tragic hero. Look at how his civic reputation is being destroyed here now as well. Is this the noble Moor? I'd be really surprised if there's another mention or use of that in the rest of the play. I would have to double check. So I'm pretty certain it's the last time, but happy to be corrected if that's not the case. Now, look at all the ideas of masculinity here and expectations of men. Whom our full senate call all in all sufficient in everything. Is this the nature whom passion could not shake? So he's meant to be master of passions, not to be mastered by them. And then there's that reference to blood. We've seen similar in terms of blood versus reason and logic. Blood is starting to win over now, thereby confirming, savage madness, but brought about by Iago, whose solid virtue, okay, very sort of manly, masculine words here in terms of the expectations of the time, whose solid virtue, the shot of accident, warlike imagery, shot, fire, the dart of chance, linking towards Cupid's dart, or maybe war as well, could neither graze nor pierce. He's impervious, he's strong, he's manly. Is this the guy that we all thought who was this? And then we get this ending of the scene here. I'm very sorry that I am deceived in him. Iago must be rubbing his hands now because he's unmade and ruined Othello privately as an individual, but also done so civically in terms of his public reputation as well. Goats and monkeys, there's Othello arguing how all those around him are behaving like animals. He feels he is not. And then there's that other reference to Cassio shall have my place. If he's called away on kind of military duty, then Cassio will deputise for him, which is another verb in the play, but obviously that takes on a more sexual suggestion now. So yeah, key moment here in terms of Othello's peripeteia. We've seen him being unmade as an individual, weakened and emasculated, but a further aspect to the peripeteia here is, of course, the destruction of his reputation, which is that triple from Cassio, but is absolutely applicable to Othello himself. Okay, our last two moments from Act 4 here. So let's have a little look at these two slides from Act 4, Scene 2. Now, Shakespeare brings in Amelia here as a voice of reason, okay? But this does two things. This compounds the dramatic irony, which the audience know of Desdemona's faithfulness, but it also helps to underline the idea of blindness here and how Othello has been completely distorted by the green-eyed monster. Okay, the reference to eyes is important because of the ability of jealousy to distort perceptions. So Amelia helps to underline that distortion of reality here. So look, if any wretch has put this in your head, then let heaven requite it. Let heaven punish the person who's put this thought in your head with the serpent's curse. So in other words, heaven should pay him, Iago, back by turning them into a serpent in the Garden of Eden to crawl on its belly, eat dust and be crushed by man. That's from Genesis chapter 3, verses 14 to 15. So the idea that punishment is, being sought here or invited towards the person who's brought about this chaos. For if she be not honest, chaste and true, there's no man happy. If she is not honest, chaste and true, then the purest of men's wives is as foul as slander. Okay, so there's a rhetorical sort of persuasion here to Amelia's speech, but absolutely the voice of reason being brought in here to help underline that distortion and how Othello's perceptions have been completely transformed here by Iago and his use of the green-eyed monster. Shakespeare shows us that this voice of reason is lost upon Othello right now. She says enough. She's a simple bawd that cannot say as much. This refers to Desdemona now, don't confuse the two. This is a subtle whore, a closet lock and key of villainous secrets. So a metaphor there to start talking about Desdemona as secrecy, really. One who keeps her crimes, which she hasn't done, hidden as if locked up in a cupboard. Okay, so a figure of deceit. Othello's inability to spot or discern the real figure of deceit. Iago, who he has virtually wedded himself to at the end of Act 3, Scene 3. There is a kind of cuckoldry going on in terms of Iago nudging or removing Desdemona from the marital sort of nest, if you like, to do the sort of cuckold imagery. And she has been wrongly deposed, evicted from that. More ideas of painted deception again, and yet she'll kneel and pray. Seen her do it. So, they're appearing like a figure of virtue when she is, in Othello's mind, the subtle whore. Don't forget, this should all speak to Othello's hubristic pride. To be a cuckold, to be a man whose wife commits adultery, is nothing but a stain on his masculine status and reputation. All right, that's how we steer it back towards the tragic hero's peripeteia here. And finally, then in Act 4, we have these moments here. So please note that Othello is not on stage around the time of these quotes, just so you're aware of that. But we have here, again, Amelia being the voice of reason. And she's sort of cathartic for the audience here in a way, because everything she's accusing or saying is absolutely true and correct. Some eternal villain has indeed, to get some office, the lieutenancy, devised this slander, and the more is abused by some most villainous knave, some base notorious knave, some scurvy fellow. So cathartic in that sense. A little reminder there from Amelia as well, something that her husband Iago did say to Othello, actually to him in Act 3, Scene 3. Please note the difference when Iago uses racial slurs about Othello when he's not around, compared to the moments, one of which is in Act 3, Scene 3, where he does invoke Othello's age and his race to target his kind of insecurities. But Amelia's sort of echoing that here, even though Othello is not around. Hath she, Desdemona, forsook so many noble matches, nobility, of sort of Venetian aristocracy? Has she got rid of her father, shunned her father, and has she forsaken her country and her friends to be called a whore? Would it not make one weep? And then Desdemona there accepting her status there. It is my wretched fortune. Now, I just want to end with this stuff on the right-hand side here. So, again, there's another kind of truth from Amelia, which Shakespeare has her use. Iago is saying, behave yourself. Sort of speak with respect and don't be shouting your mouth off. Speak within door. So there's an attempt for the husband to try and control and master his wife, to which Amelia says, upon them. Such a squire he was. So we're talking about this hypothetical scurvy knave, villainous knave, who has tainted and tricked Othello here, which is of course Iago, but she's being sort of speculative here. Fie upon them. Such a squire was this knave. He was that turned your wit the seamy side without, and made you to suspect me with the Moor. Now, we've heard that earlier, where Iago kind of, in a very weak way, claims that he suspects Othello having slept with Amelia as well. We can't prove that at all. But I wanted to focus on the verb turned here, that turned your wit the seamy side without. So in previous videos we've spoken about how love has the capacity to transform us from creatures of reason and logic, targets the blood, and then we become more animalistic and not civilised and completely unreasonable and unreasoned in our behaviour. And there's 2 quotes from Act 2, Scene 3, which repeats this idea of turned or transformed. So jealousy can turn and transform reason and logic here. Turns your wit, Iago's wit, the seamy side without. But we also have Iago elsewhere. Now my sick fool Rodrigo, whom love hath turned almost the wrong side out. It's virtually the same quote as, look this, that turned your wit the seamy side without. Also in Act 2, Scene 3, when Othello comes to break up the drunken skirmish and the fight, again engineered by Iago, are we turned Turk by having this drunken brawl in the middle of war-torn Cyprus on high alert? Have we turned into barbarians, the Turks? So I thought that was interesting just to notice there with things like love, jealousy, has that capacity to make man kind of demote themselves down the chain of being, to go from being a reasonable being, beg your pardon, towards animalistic behaviour on the chain of being. This has certainly happened to Othello, of course. The savage madness that our civilised monster has brought about, a civil monster has brought about. Okay, there's Act 4 in terms of Othello's tragic arc. Hopefully I'll be able to get to Act 5 soon, and then there's a complete set of videos going through the tragic hero's journey. If this has been useful, please share it with someone else who might find it useful. Let us know your thoughts, let us know some comments. Thank you very much.